Um, Good morning, everyone, and thank you for making the time to join us for this insightful session around the successful startup or the traits of a successful startup founder in Africa. I would just want us to kick off immediately in terms of the presentation so that we don't take too much of your time. So my name is Victor Otieno. I'm the Managing Director of FIFA Consult, which is a startup and SME policy think tank based here in Nairobi, Kenya. I would not take the form of a PPT. Just like Murphy's Law says, when things go south, they really, really go south. So we had prepared a presentation, but we realized that it had a couple of errors. So we probably just go through the report. I would try to be brief so that I also don't take too much of your time. So the study that we are looking at, out for is the successful Kenyan startup founder persona. So what is the secret sauce? So we hear of Kenya, doing very well in terms of innovation, in terms of our founders, in terms of our startups. We see a lot of fundraising happening. And of course, based on the different indices, we see, so for instance, I think this year, or is it last year, we saw that Kenyan founders were able to raise over 800 million in terms of VC capital, which is almost among the highest in Africa. So the question I think that lingers both from us as researchers as well as different ecosystem players is what really makes the founders tick. What is the formula that we can prescribe to other founders or other entrepreneurs for them to be successful? So it is that we decided to explore through this particular study, and it's quite interesting in terms of what we really found out. So in terms of our approach and our methodology to be able to find exactly what the secret sauce is we were able to scour around or do literature review of top founders or top startups in Kenya over the last 5 years. So these are the financial year or the years 2018 to 2022. So just looking at these 5 years and asking ourselves, so which are the top startups based on funding? So of course the argument could be that you can't gauge the success or failure of a startup based on funding. I mean, there are startups that are there that are making revenue and they are succeeding. The thing is, it's very difficult for you to be able to get that data. So we chose funding as a success matrix, and that's what we use. So we were able to scour different investment reports. We actually were able to go through 13 different reports, and you can see them here, these investment reports that are analyzed. So what we are doing is we are going from 2018 to 2022 and looking at the different reports and trying to percolate and identify the top 10, at least from a Kenya perspective, startups that featured there. And not only that, we are also benchmarking with other countries, at least the top in Africa. So Nigeria, South Africa, Egypt, and just asking ourselves, are those traits that Kenyan startups portraying similar to what is in Africa as well as other countries? Again, the identification of these countries in terms of startups is based on, again, reports that are there. You have the Startup Ecosystem Index that is able to rank different startup countries and spaces. So we were able to just be able to pick countries that would be able to benchmark with that. So after picking the startup or the top startups per year, we were now again doing a bit of research in terms of looking at least 11 data points. So looking at the age of the founders, looking at the gender, nationality, university attended, highest education, just asking ourselves, trying to see if we can be able to get some common denominator in terms of these founders. So looking at social media following in terms of network, does that have an effect on your success as a founder? Looking at corporate experience, so do they have corporate experience? To what level? How many years of corporate experience do they have? Are they straight from campus? Number of exits, academic articles published, number of patents associated with the founder, as well as any accolades or recognition that they have received. So again, these characteristics can be expounded. I mean, this is just a start for us to be able to have a conversation. So that's the methodology or the approach that we took. And of course, our objective for this report is not to be to decide for stakeholders what they need to do. We just wanted to give you the numbers and and see the trends, and maybe as an ecosystem player you can decide either from a policy perspective to tweak, or from a pragmatic perspective to be able to change so that we're able to support the startups and founders better. So the idea around this is to again just give the data for you as ESOs and innovation stakeholders to make your decision. So as I mentioned, the report analyzed at least 13 investment reports over a period of 5 years, 2018 to 2022, and just looking at, of course, the top startups and the character or the data points in terms of character that we felt would be important. So moving forward, possibly is just to see or to explore or get suggestions in terms of other traits that you feel that we should be able to explore. Again, we are happy to incorporate that into the next version of the report. So around key findings, and again, this is just a high level. We see, and of course, we immediately after this, we'll see the data that we're able to collect that supports these findings. So again, startups prefer to incorporate in countries that have supportive policy and regulatory environment. And we've seen this in Kenya. Again, we have data around the same. We indicate that yes, startups, they can have the operation in Kenya, but where the company is actually incorporated maybe possibly sits in Delaware or sits in the US. Again, that is a telling tale of maybe the environment or regulatory environment in Kenya. Again, compare that with other African countries as well as other global countries. Again, that's something that is interesting. We saw that at least majority of the successful startups had an average of 2 founders at the very least. Again, this really is not a hypothesis, but almost is like for you to be successful as a startup, having a co-founder and having a team around you increases the chances of you being successful. Again, this is not news to most of you. Probably is something that you know. Again, successful startups in Kenya specifically have a combination of founders from host, or natives or host nationals, and combined with foreign nationals. And again, we have the mix or the proportion of local let me call it native founder with foreign founder. The combination changes or varies from one country to the next. Again, that has a bearing in terms of programmatic implication, as well as looking at Kenya as an ecosystem. When we say as a successful startup, what portion of value remains in Kenya? Again, this is up for debate. Higher education and corporate experience is very much correlated with successful startup. So we've seen again startups having or startup founders, having at least masters, or some of them have PhDs. So there's a direct correlation between the level of education and the success of a startup. Finally, Rab, could you sorry about that. So again, similar key policy program implications. Again, based on the data we're seeing, the idea is to be able to inform policy and inform programs. So what we see based on the characteristics we are seeing, there has to be a need to focus on skills development, that prioritize practical skills, so that even if you don't have the education of a master's, then if you come to an incubator, if you come to through an acceleration program, can you be able to focus on practical skills rather than maybe academic? Can we be able to promote founders to be domain experts in certain areas that they're running their startup? So I mean that is something that we saw, that a lot of successful founders already have good corporate experience, as well as a domain experts within the sector or the startup that they start. Whether it's in agriculture, in technology, in healthcare, you'd find that someone maybe is coming from that sector from a corporate perspective and is based on identification of a certain problem, then probably they're able to set up a startup that goes on to be successful. Build resilience and support networks. Again, what we see is based on the successful state of a founder, then we can be able to use that or infer that to be able to build our programs. So programs that build resilience and support networks for startups, again, is something that ESOs need to look into. Looking at diversity and inclusion, again, the data that we've seen based on analysis is we see a mixture of founders who are native with international founders. We see a mix of between women, male and female. Again, different domain expertise. I think based on the data, we see that being able to promote diversity and inclusion can be able to help, both an ESO in terms of an incubator, or as well as an accelerator, or even if it's a CSO that is running a startup or entrepreneurship program. So streamlining bureaucracy and regulations, again, based on a startup setting up shop in countries that are perceived or not even perceived that have a friendly regulatory environment, is something that, as a country, we need to explore. How do we, look at policy, and how can we create an enabling policy to allow not only to encourage local founders, to also to bring international founders, but also allow them to incorporate in Kenya. So yes, we can have the operations in Kenya, but what happens is probably where the money sits, in terms of funding, maybe it sits somewhere else. So the country is not able to realize the full value of the fundraising because the money sits outside, and Kenya is only used as a sales or a marketing space where they just operate, but the value is still outside there. Promote access to funding. Again, as a country, we need to be able to ask ourselves, for how long are we going to rely on VC money from either Europe, US? We need to start developing programs that allow for local corporates to play a bigger role in terms of funding startups. We need to see government also exert itself and pronounce itself in terms of being able to provide the risk capital, at least from an angel perspective or a grant perspective, so that government is able to de-risk startups through direct funding, through grants, through loans, through assisting in terms of getting procurement opportunities within county as well as national government. So the idea of this data is not to prescribe; it's just to showcase what we've seen based on the studies that we've done, and see the common denominator in terms of what are these traits that these successful startups or founders have that can be infused into policy as well as programmatic programs within different ESOs. So just diving into the numbers again, these numbers we refrained from making conclusions so that we don't seem to be biased. So what we are doing and with this report is we were able to just present the facts as based on what we've done in terms of literature review. So in terms of average Kenyan startup age, and again this is between the years 2018 to 2022, you can see the graph there. We can see 7 years at 2018, 6 years at 2019, 2020 we had an average, and this is an average, so it's not this is the average of the startups that we focused on based on the list that we received from we got from different investment profiles. So we can see an average of around 7 to 6 to around 9 years. And this is important because remember when Kenya was doing, and different African countries have been developing startup bills, there is always a question of up to how long can you be described as a startup? Can you operate for like 10, 20 years and still call yourself a startup? So I think you can already see, based on the data that we are seeing here, is that people who are deemed or called startups, have an average age of around 6 to around 9, 10 years. So any policy program or intervention that is looking at supporting startups should be able to look at the age of between 6 and possibly 9 or 10 years, depending with the sector. So again, this is not too far off, and it's really buttresses the fact that startup beyond 10 years, I mean, you should not call yourself a startup. probably you need to be able to either transition to a medium-sized business or something, and get a different kind of support that that is so that you allow resources to go to startups that really are deserving. So that's number one. Number two is in terms of data is we were looking at startup incorporation trend. So where, even if you say you are Kenyan startup, where is the organization incorporated? So as we can see here, again, looking at the different years between 2018 and 2022. So on this side of the graph is startups, proportion of startups that incorporated within the country. So you're looking at, this is the year 2018, this is the year 2018. So within country, we see 60% in 2018 incorporated within the country, 40% incorporated outside. Again, in 2019, the proportion within country increased marginally, but you can see already it's an average of 50–60%. So we still have an average of around 40% that is incorporating outside of Kenya. So again, from a policy perspective here, the implication is how can we be able to institute programs and policies that allow more of these startups to Reha, please just try to mute. Thank you so much. So here the question, at least from a policy perspective, is how do we encourage more startups to incorporate in Kenya, not only to operate in Kenya, but to incorporate in Kenya. Again, this is a very hard task. Again, we are competing with global countries that have really been at it in terms of looking at promoting investments. In terms of tax rates, in terms of incentives around the same. So I think maybe from a Kenyan perspective, either from Kenya, the KenInvest as an organization must be able to either engage with the startup ecosystem and ask what really are the ingredients, what are the necessary things that or factors that they need to take into consideration to ensure that more startup incorporate within the country. So that we probably can be able to have a higher proportion setting up in country as opposed to setting up elsewhere. So if you are to compare this to global startup incorporation, we see startups in majorly in Germany, US, Singapore setting up shop in country. So this particular graph is just looking at the percentage of outside of country operation. So you can see, say for example, for Egypt is 30%. So 30% operate outside of the country, and this is you can see from 2019 going up. For this is Nigeria. So it's not that it's something that is unique in Kenya, and it's not a must that you operate within the country of operation. Again, different reasons. But I think from a policy perspective, you want to be able to get most value. So when you hear that that a country such as Kenya has been able to raise 500 million, 800 million US dollars. The question from a policy perspective is always where is the money? So it's like GDP. You can talk about GDP, but GDP is not in my pocket. So again, for this, I think from a country perspective, we need to be able to look or explore strategies to ensure that we get most value in terms of at least having a majority of this funding sitting in Kenya. The explanation is simple. The way banks operate, the more you have money within the ecosystem, it means that again another SME or another startup can be able to get some credit of sorts. And again, this would have a very good bearing on exchange rate. I think the biggest topic now that is being discussed in Kenya is the depreciating shilling. And at the core of it is we are not exporting. So we are importing a lot of things. So it means that there is no demand. We're not able to attract dollars. So again, we leave it out to different stakeholders to decide on the kind of programs that they would want to institute to ensure that we have more local startups being founded in Kenya. So we see Kenyan startup is incorporating overseas, particularly in Delaware and US. So again, this is based on the data that we were able to manage to get. We are averaging around 14% between 2018 and 2022. So this basically means that 41% of startups that we looked at, 41% are setting up shop outside of the country. So again, based on some conversations or interviews we've had, there are certain reasons for this. So of course, we are looking at improved capital because they're able to access a larger pool of investors in those countries. The ease of doing business in those countries is much better as compared to Kenya. The issues around currency stability, especially if you're fundraising in hard currencies such as pound, euro, dollar. So you don't want to convert that money to shillings, then it adds more headache to you. Second reason is brand perception. So some would set up shop outside, just from a branding perspective, to get local, global recognition. Easier to get to expand internationally if you maybe set up somewhere in the global north or Asia or elsewhere. So ease of talent acquisition in mature ecosystem. Again, that's a third reason, as well as access to better infrastructure and technology within that particular environment. So like I said, I think the implication around this is government of Kenya, and of course we're looking at it from a Kenyan perspective, is we need to align Vision 2030, the different MTPs, and specifically under the Kenya Kwanza government of bottom-up, is of course there is a focus on SMEs, agriculture, as well as the digital super high as an avenue for supporting the innovation ecosystem. Sorry, I don't know. Ra, please kindly mute. Just be careful. Thanks so much. So again, the government, again, just to for the sake of, or for the outcome of attracting investment, as well as allowing startups to be able to incorporate in Kenya, needs to look at some of the issues that I think already have been said. I don't need to belabor the point. Is simplification of business permit registration, business registration processes, which I think government has been able to do this through e-Citizen and BRS etc. Is how do we just fine-tune and increase efficiency and ensure that the cost of not only registering but running a business, both especially in the counties, makes sense. So I think on the 13th, and I think I need to mention this, on the 13th of February, we are going to be launching another index called the County Business Support Index, where we are looking at how effective or how friendly is the business environment within counties. So a lot of things, a lot of programs, a lot of activities need to take place within the counties to ensure that it's not only cost effective but also is very efficient for us to be able to settle to run both SMEs as well as startups within the counties. Looking at a predictable legal environment, looking at issues around IP, dispute resolution, small courts, which were launched, but again, we've not seen progress around the same. Tax benefits for us to be able to compete with with other nations where some of these startups are setting up. It needs that from a government perspective, we need to be able to really look into the business climate or environment for startups. The next trait we are looking is nationality of startups. Again, we have maybe, say, for example, top 10 startups in Kenya. You find that the founders, and of course, this, again, as I said, in terms of recommendations, is we've seen that startups have at least 2 founders. And especially in Kenya, we have a mixture of between native as well as foreign or founders who are coming from, who are citizens of other nations. So again, we see that we have a very high proportion of foreign founders in Kenya. 2018, we had at least 80%, with 20% coming to Kenya. And of course, this on average is where it sits. So as much as in and maybe probably this drives the agenda of setting up shop maybe outside of the country. Again, this is just data, and we're presenting it as is. So again, if you look at the same data across the different countries that we're comparing, Germany, Nigeria, etc., we see that the proportion is not too far off. Like for instance, in Nigeria, we see, and Nigeria is represented by color orange here. So we can see Nigeria has native proportion trend. So we see Nigeria has 60% 55%, 80%, 70%, 70% of them being local founders, vis-a-vis Kenya, where we see 20% on average, where we see local founders. So yes, again, this is a telltale sign. What we see, and we didn't present this, is around data, is we're also tracking the university of the founders and the university ranking. So we see, like for instance, where we see in Kenya, we see foreign founders taking a huge proportion. And of course, the implication of this from an education perspective is that a lot of them are also coming from Ivy League type or highly ranked universities globally. In Nigeria, it's a very interesting thing that we saw is that, yes, they are local founders, but if you're to compare with the education that they take, is a lot of them are going to the same schools, are trying to go to to universities in Europe and in US. I don't know, again, it's for you to make your conclusion around the same. Again, our push, I think, is to see an increase in terms of local founders, an increase in terms of setting up shop in Kenya for startups, as well as increase of local investments to play a bigger role. And I think being able to get some of this data out, such as through these reports, then again, it can be able to clear the air and remove the haziness and the fluffiness that is in the ecosystem, to allow more people to understand the ecosystem as well as engage. So local startup founders in Kenya average around 17.8%. This is looking at the years 2018, 2022. If you're to compare to Nigeria, which is at 67%, South Africa 62%, as well as Egypt almost having 100% local founders. Again, this is an average and these are representation. So it's not like we are able to do a full sample of the different ecosystems. It's just a sample based on the top 10 that we saw on those reports. Probably those numbers could vary, but this is just a dipstick in terms of us being able to understand that. But at least we need to find a way in which we can be able to design programs that allow more local founders to be successful as startups. So Kenyan ESOs, again, in terms of implication, need to establish startup programs or venture building programs, targeting local founders, averaging 30 years with significant corporate experience, cognizant that corporate experience is very important to the success of a startup. So again, from an ESO perspective, an incubator or an accelerator perspective, is again, we need to look at this success and ask ourselves, how do we tweak our programs to enable us get more local founders, and attract more local capital in country. So again, from a government perspective, is looking at, given that we've seen that the trend is a lot of these successful startups have significant corporate experience, they are middle age, around 30s there. Is there a way in which we can be able to incentivize, middle-level C-suite managers to venture out and establish startups? We saw this with the Tunisian startup bill, where they were giving pay-as-you-earn tax breaks to founders, or even you would get a paid leave if you are to go out and maybe stay out for a year, take a sabbatical, explore innovation and come up with something. So that we're able to tap into that knowledge that a lot of these middle-level corporate not CEOs but managers have. So again, it's something to think about. In terms of average number of founders, again, I think, like I indicated, it averages around 2. So it's 1.7 because we are doing a lot of average and a lot of across board. So what we didn't want to round off everything so that it seems like we are cooking numbers. So that we see 2, guys will be like, you guys are not serious. So again, the points is just a question of average, but at least what we're seeing is average number of founders is 2. So again, this is a practice that has been used across the Kenyan ecosystem for long, in terms of you can't be a single founder. It doesn't mean that you will not succeed as a single founder. It just means that the global practice, best practice, is to have at least 2 founders. In terms of average age, again, just looking at the top 10 that we saw, you can see it's an average of 28 all the way to 36. And the way we are looking at this average is we are looking at a startup. If they have 2 founders, would average their ages. So if there are 3, we would just say 30, 30, 30 divided by 3 and get an average. So again, you'd find that number, would go up to 40, 45, and in some instances you can be able to get 20, less than 28. So again, this is an average. So it tells you that if you are designing an accelerator program, or you are designing, or you are setting up, you have an incubation program that is supporting startups, you probably would want to be able to focus on a middle-aged type. And if you're focusing at middle-aged type of around 30, where are they? Are they just sitting in the house, maybe with no corporate experience? Chances are no. So then how do we develop programs for either people who want to move away from the corporate world to come to set up their business as a startup or as an SME? So again, we need to be able to cater for that type of demography, so that it's not, it's more, it is able to reflect the aspirations of this particular age. So it's not like we are going to do hackathons for campus guys. Yes, that's important, but for us to be able to grow local founders and be able to attract more capital, then it means that we need to be very deliberate in terms of being able to have programs that allows people with very good corporate experience to come and test out, either within the corporate, either approaching corporates and designing programs or innovations within the corporate themselves, or getting the individual managers to come for maybe a program outside of their companies. Again, it's just hypothesis, it's just suggestions. Again, in terms of average, globally, it's more or less the same. Looking at all the different countries that we are looking out for. I think it's only in Japan, which maybe we haven't indicated here, but Japan almost had the highest average. We can see Singapore also operating on the top band in terms of age. 42, 40, 38, 38. So it's if you're looking at Kenya, is around 30s. For Singapore, we see it operating at a higher number, similar to Japan. And we also saw that in those two countries, Japan, Singapore, Germany as well, we see from an education perspective, a lot of the founders there were PhD holders. Again, if you have to correlate that to the type of, or the sectors that they invest in, we see a lot of science-based or human science-based innovations. While vis-a-vis in Kenya, we see a lot of tech or ICT-based type of innovation. Again, that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Do we want to stay within fintech? So even, for how long are we going to stay within fintech? And for how long are we going to remain within ICT-based kind of innovation? We need to be able to explore how we shift to more life science-based type of innovation that can be able to extract. We're able to not only address local challenges, but we're able to extract more value. We would want to, let's say, the way we had during COVID. We had a Tunisian startup, succeed in terms of vaccines. So you can imagine the number of years it took, and the amount of R&D and the kind of investments that have been put, either from the startup perspective as well as from a government perspective, to ensure that universities and entrepreneurs are able to bring some of these innovations to market. So again, Kenyan startups average 33 compared to 32, 34, Nigeria, etc. So again, not much implication, but it's just good data. In terms of education, we can see here in Kenya 2018, we had at least 50% at master's level. 2019, so we can see that there is a big correlation between success and level of education. And like I mentioned, just comparing this across the globe, we can see that on average you have at least a master level or PhD level kind of education required for you to be able to not only succeed as a startup, but to be able to be recognized as a domain expert from an investor perspective. So another aspect that we're exploring is around social media following. And again, you might call this fluff, but again, it's just exploring. So one of the theories that around incubation, or the key success factors for an incubator is, and of course, this even cuts across business in general, is they say that your network is your network. So we wanted to just draw very high correlation between, to see if there is a correlation between network based on social media following and success. So we just wanted to explore that. So we can see on average this around 17,000, and we are focusing on only two social media platforms, Twitter as well as LinkedIn. Someone would argue, what about Instagram? What about these other channels? Again, it's just a technical call that we made in terms of most likely, if you are a startup and you're in business, again, your LinkedIn profile is where probably we can be able to find you. So we just wanted to see, based on that, what kind of network you have. So on average, again, we can see around it varies from year on year. But we can see at least 15,000 going up is an average. So we did a comparison across the different countries. We can see Nigeria is very big. Nigeria and US are very big in terms of social media following. Again, I'm not sure what that basically means, but the idea around this is there's a very, very big correlation between level of education as well as social media or your network with your level of success as a startup. So on average, we have Kenyan founders averaging around 15,000 between the 5 years. Compared to 52, 70, and 61,000. So you can see, again, you can argue that we have more foreign founders vis-a-vis local founders, but at least from a Nigeria perspective, we see that there's a very high correlation between success and social media following, or basically your network. Corporate experience, again, as I mentioned, we can see, again, we see more than 10 years in terms of corporate experience featuring highly to a lot of these startup founders, with less than 20% on average having less than 10 years. So then the question is, how do we design? Yes, we have programs that look at high school campus all the way from primary. So we need to be able to have a systematic way of having this pipeline developed. So then it means that probably then as incubators, as accelerators, there is a clear case for us to be able to develop programs that target, average 30 to 40-year-old who are either within their corporate companies or would want to be able to venture out. So this gives a case for that, given that we've seen that they can be quite successful if they were to get a supportive environment. Again, exploring academic articles published. So this is not happening in Kenya as such, but again, for countries such as Singapore, Japan, etc., we see a lot of academic articles published. You would note that, for instance, Google originated from a PhD thesis. So again, there is a correlation between level of education, articles published, and the success of a startup. So from a Kenyan startup founder perspective, we see that they publish an average of 12% between the years 2018, 2022, 20%, 14%, 18% for Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt. So it's very important that we start, exploring, shifting away from fintech, and just bringing, your academia, your typical professor, with their thesis, and again, linking them up with entrepreneurs, and being able to explore how we can be able to bring some of this innovation that sits as IP in academia into the market. It's easier said than done. I think we've seen efforts in Kenya, I think led by the Kenya Innovation Agency, trying to develop programs that can allow, academia to link up with entrepreneurs, so that we can be able to get more startups, more innovation outside of ICT type business, going to deep tech and that kind of stuff. So again, this is very important, and we've seen across the globe that happening. Patent associated with the startup, which is very much linked to the kind of academic publications that is done. Again, from a Kenyan perspective, we still are quite low in terms of the patents that are associated with the founders. Possibly, again, because of the small number in terms of local founders, maybe, and a very big focus on ICT type technology, where maybe probably patents are not as pervasive. Possibly, we see if we're able to succeed in terms of being able to invest in R&D from a national government perspective, also from a corporate perspective, investing in R&D, then possibly again combine that with a collaboration between academia as well as corporate with entrepreneurship. Then possibly we will be able to see more academic type journals going up, patents going up, and of course we based on that, the byproduct would be we can be able to get more successful startups and more successful startup founders who are attracting quite a bit of capital. Again, lastly, is just looking at professional recognition. Again, it's just exploring. It's not something that has been done before. Are we seeing what is there a correlation between you as a domain expert getting some sort of recognition? So we see Kenyan startup founders receiving recognition on average of 50%, which is not too bad. So this, again, it doesn't have to be, it could be a state commendation, it could be an industry recognition, etc. Compared to 12% and 25% for our African brothers. So again, I don't know what that means. Again, it's just maybe for us to look at that data in depth and see what type of profession or what type of recognition they are getting. But they always say numbers, cash flow is king. So yes, you can get recognition, but we need to see those numbers translating into investment in Kenya. So ladies and gentlemen, sorry for ranting too much, but that's been the report that we were able to share. Probably I would open this to comments, feedback. Again, it's just a draft report. We of course value feedback, and we would probably share this document out for feedback, for reflections, etc. And possibly we can see if we can be able to co-design as an ecosystem programs or even influence policy to some degree based on the data we are seeing. So asanteni sana, thank you very much. And if you have any questions or comments, it will be open for all of us. So we can do that in the next maybe 15 minutes or so. Then probably we can just wrap it up. So since it's a Friday and I would not want to hold you on a Members' Day. Yes, Mr. Henry.
Yeah, good morning. Hello?
Yes, Henry, proceed.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay, awesome. Sorry, so I joined in, I think, 10 minutes late. I did not have the opportunity to get your name from the word go. Probably you'll answer that when I'm done. So really awesome presentation or reports that you've presented to us. When I saw a notification for this meeting, I didn't know what to expect out of the meeting, in all honesty. It's just that I'm at a point in my life where probably there's a lot of things I'm trying to explore. One of them being also someone who would want to start, create a startup. So sometimes if you have a minute or two to spare, I feel it's so bad to attend some of these meetings. Yeah, but I've really learned a great deal of things from the presentations you've given us. Some of it a bit more of some sort of how would I put it, doomsday kind of predictions. Yeah, especially given the fact that we have a lot of foreign founders in our ecosystem. So I don't know what that means exactly for local founders. Does it mean that for you to succeed, there needs to be a combination between foreign and local founders? Is there any statistics around that for startups that have been purely, either local or a mixture of local foreign? Which ones tend to succeed more? Of course, as you said, most of these foreign founders, maybe the level of education they're getting and the kind of expertise they're coming in with might be the key advantage that they have over maybe local founders. Number two, given that there's that whole scenario where let's assume you're a local founder, this sort of idea that you have, maybe to start a startup or something. How are you able to access a network of people who are also interested in different aspects of ventures in terms of being founders? Are there programs in place for such initiatives? Yes, thank you. All the same, thank you so very much. I think I've really learned a great deal from your presentation.
Thank you very much, Henry. And my name is Victor Otieno. I'm the managing director of VIFA Consult, which is a startup and SME think tank that focuses on research to inform policy. Like I said, I think for us, the idea was to present data as is. It's not for us to be able to, it's for different stakeholders to be able to draw different conclusions. Again, I don't think having more foreign founders is a bad thing. I think there is a lot of technology transfer, knowledge exchange that can take place. I think from a policy perspective, from a government perspective, we need to be able to see more local startups, more startups being set up, whether it's a mix of local and foreign, setting up shop in Kenya and getting the funding seat in Kenya. The implication of that is when fund sits in a certain country, it means that you're able to, of course, banks are able to lend to others and again is able to expand the economic output of a country. So for us, the question is then how do we develop programs that allows more local founders to play a bigger role, similar to what we see in Nigeria. In terms of forums for founders, for startups, I think there are so many. I mean, there are different associations. We have the ASEC, we have the Countrywide Innovation Hubs, we have FinTech Association, we have the Digital Financial Lenders Association, etc. So I think it's a question of where your interest is. Then probably we can be able to just get into those network. If you have challenges around the same, you can always reach out to me. I can be able to link you up to different forums for startups that would suit you. Thank you so much. I think we'll go with Moses, then we'll go with Joe, based on. Moses Ochieng. You're a bit faint.
Hello, Victor.
Yes, Moses, proceed.
Nice. Thank you so much for the presentation. It's a very nice look into how I would say, like, the same to like the previous speaker. I really do not know what to expect, but with the report that you have given, I think it's very insightful. So my question is in relation to what you mentioned about what Japan is doing with people that have probably been in the corporate space for a number of years, giving them tax breaks and then letting them come into, I would say, like the startup or entrepreneurial ecosystem through support. And I was just thinking, because if you look at the ICT sector and probably the fintech space that you mentioned, most of the founders are pretty much younger, an average of like 30 or below that. So I was thinking, is there a way in which we can have, I would say, like the two groups? Because I have a feeling that working with people that already like are in the corporate space is normally difficult because of this. I would say, like, to them there's a lot of a sense of responsibility either to their family. So moving to something new and probably like starting something new is normally, I would say, like scary for them, because there is that I still want to remain in my job because I have to support my family. But with younger people, it's I would say like they are trying it because there's not so much to lose in it. So I think a fit between the two would be like really so key, because we have, at one hand, we have people that have like really good experience and on the other hand, we have people with the energy and zeal to like just start something new. So we can have, I would say, like more startups, not just in the ICT space, but every other place, like probably going past 5 years of maybe attracting investment, because I have faced it myself. So we were competing against startups from Nigeria, and they had like people that have been in the corporate space for like a number of years, and the only reason they proceeded was so the investor came in and said, because you guys have pretty much had all the experience in the corporate space, I feel I am more secure investing in you than investing in the other startups. So how can we have a mixture of the two while still encouraging, I would say, like both generations to like continue working together?
Yeah, so I completely agree. I think for me, the idea of presenting this data was to be able to draw lessons. It doesn't mean that we say we should. I'm saying we should encourage, corporate type above 30 type programs. All we're saying is based on the success that we've seen them doing, maybe in terms of fundraising, and again, this can be looked as biased, is what lessons can we be able to draw in terms of either if it's experience, how do we infuse experience, network, and that type within programs for other sectors as well as even for lower bracket or age bracket startups. So I think that I completely agree. I think both of them can exist. It's just a question of how this is just giving us data that can inform the type of work or the type of programs that we want to have. So again, different incubators, accelerators, associations can decide how to be able to do that. But again, at least we have evidence in terms of if we are to go to a certain direction in terms of either a mix or focusing on this and that, at least we have data that can be able to back that up. Thank you so much. Joe?
And everyone else, good to see you, my brother. It's been a while.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Good to see that you're still doing great things. So yeah, thank you for your contribution to this industry. And it's just amazing. I also joined a bit late, but I've enjoyed just listening to the research and the thoughts and the process that has gone into that. Yeah, so mine is to kind of affirm you and to say most of the things actually you said sit true with me. I used to hear that for your startup to succeed, you must have a Jumbo founder or somebody who's gone to Cambridge. And I used to fight with that a lot. Until I said, why don't I try this? Let me tell you, my brother, the minute, and I ran a couple of startups, and I also see it in the Biz-driven zone, Nairobi group. So for one of my startups, I actually approached one of my friends from Texas. And let me tell you, the minute he came in, we began to get some funding. And it doesn't mean necessarily that the idea was bad, but I don't know, it just made a difference. And it also speaks to the idea you are talking about your network, being your network. So sometimes it's not even that our ideas are bad, but we just need to get the right point to the team. The other one was about having somebody in your co-founder team who's gone to an Ivy League university. So my co-founder of called Kilele Accelerator signed up for a master's in social innovation at Cambridge. And immediately he did that and did his best. We got some funding. And we've been trying to get funding for like 4 years. So this research, fits very true with me from experience. And I also like the fact that you're talking about the role of academia. Myself, I did my master's thesis was on the effect of transformational leadership on the performance of top 100 SMEs in Kenya. And I can see how that has contributed and elicited some interest. So I like the research areas, the focus areas you're bringing even to us in academia. So you can begin to see what we focus on. Maybe somebody should do a research and say, what's the effect of founder composition to the success of SMEs in Nairobi, because that seems to be a contributing factor. What is the role of the university? The founders have gone to such kind of things. So I think these are also good pointers in terms of pointing us in the right direction in terms of research areas that we should adopt as people in academia as well. Yeah, so thank you. I can't wait to, I hope this report will be circulated so that we can dig more and probably draw a lot of insight from that, and as you rightly said, advice policy on a moving forward. So thank you so much and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Asante sana Joe. Thank you very much for the comments from all of you. Thank you very much for making the time so that we don't also hold you too much. I can see Kesubere has just shot her and it's exactly 10. So again, because she is for gender balance, we don't want to be accused of not considering gender. So karibu sana Kesubere. Maybe try to keep it short so that we can just wrap it up.
That's fine. I think for me, the big thing is the realization that, and because I work in the micro, I work a lot more with micros. So the whole conversation that an external founder ideally did, education, all that is critical to success. It flips my thought process to, and like you said, it's all about just drawing insights. It flips my thought process to how do we then enable more people to access these kinds of networks, which is really the work we do as ESOs, right? So that it would mean working a lot more on mindset, working a lot more on thinking through stuff. So it's given me a completely many questions, because I was like, some of this stuff counters a lot of what we see on the ground, but as usual, quite groundly different. And also looking when that's just the parameters of the research, were diametrically different from who we work with. But it gives us, my team and I, a lot more to think about in terms of how to prepare teams to succeed, help SMEs succeed. So thanks, very useful.
Thank you very much, Shesubere. And thank you very much, everyone, for your thoughts. And what we'll do is immediately after this, we'll, because of course we are recording this conversation, we'll put it on YouTube. We'll circulate the report again for public consumption. You'll notice a lot of our research is free, so you can interact and engage. You can give us feedback where you think we should pursue in terms of research. Again, just to be able to inform the ecosystem. That's the whole goal of having these reports out. So asanteni sana, thank you very much, and have yourselves a good day and a great weekend.
You too.